My mom answered the phone on my graduation day with laughter in the background and the sound of waves crashing. "Hi, sweetie, everything okay?" she chirped like nothing was wrong. I stood there in my cap and gown, clutching my diploma, watching other families wrap their kids in flowers and champagne. "Just wondering where you are," I said. She hesitated. "Oh, right. We're on a cruise with Brian. He just got that new job offer, remember? We wanted to do something special for him." I froze. My parents skipped my medical school graduation the day I'd clawed my way toward for years to sip cocktails on a boat because my little brother landed an entry-level sales job. My classmates were posing for photos with teary parents. I had no one. I didn't scream, didn't beg. I just whispered, "Then don't bother showing up to my future either." And I hung up. It wasn't the first time they'd chosen Brian over me. But that day on the lawn outside my medical school, watching sunlight spill across the Charles River while my phone screen went dark, something inside me snapped in silence. Everyone else looked like they were in a movie, balloons bobbing in the breeze, bouquets pressed against silk dresses, champagne spraying against a blue sky. Meanwhile, I stood at the edge of the crowd holding my diploma like a prop I couldn't find the right scene for. Pride needs an audience. All I had was the ache of absence. The truth is, I'd been rehearsing disappointment for years. When I was 12, I won second place at the state science fair. I built a clunky little project on antibiotic resistance with nothing but library books and late nights at the kitchen table. I remember looking into the crowd, hoping to see my parents' faces. They weren't there. Brian had a little league game, and apparently that was unmissable. I held that ribbon so tight my palm sweated ink onto it. But when I climbed into the car with a friend's mom afterward, I swore I'd never care about their absence again. That promise didn't hold. Even in med school, I tried to pretend I didn't notice. Every time I called with good news, there was always something brighter happening in Brian's orbit. When I passed step one of the hardest exams in medicine, I got a text, "Cool, buddy. Congrats." Buddy, like I'd just beaten them at a video game. When Brian got hired to sell insurance, they threw him a backyard barbecue with banners and sparklers. The smoke of grilled burgers curled into the sky. Neighbors came over, photos filled their Facebook feeds. For me, nothing. The box started then. A shoebox I lined with every scrap of evidence that I wasn't invisible. Copies of acceptance letters, each one highlighted in yellow where it said top candidate or thrilled to offer you admission. Dean's list emails underlined. Even the handmade card I once left on their kitchen counter because I couldn't afford a real gift construction paper, shaky handwriting, a little heart I'd cut with dull scissors. It was still sealed years later when I found it shoved in a drawer. They never opened it. Sometimes I'd take the box out late at night when the silence of my apartment pressed too heavy. I'd spread the papers across my bed like a strange shrine. Part of me hoped one day they'd stumble upon it and finally see what I'd been screaming in silence. But another part of me, darker, sharper, knew that if they ever did, it would be too late. That's what burned on graduation day. It wasn't just the absence. It was the reminder that no matter how high I climbed, their eyes were always fixed somewhere else. On Brian, on excuses, on anything but me. The night of graduation, I came home still dressed in my navy gown and stiff shoes, the tassel hanging limp against my shoulder. My classmates were probably still out celebrating with their families, but I walked straight into the kind of silence that swallows you whole. I didn't bother turning on the TV. I didn't even take off my heels. I went to the closet, slid open the door, and pulled out the box. It sat heavy in my lap, the cardboard edges soft from being opened too many times on nights when I needed proof I existed. I lifted the lid and looked at the neat rows of papers, each one a piece of my life, that should have been celebrated, treasured, framed even. Instead, they were just artifacts of a girl who kept knocking on a door no one answered. The handmade anniversary card was still on top. Pink construction paper glued edges slightly curled the marker bleeding through. To the best parents in the world, 12-year-old me had scrawled in crooked letters. I ran my thumb across the heart I'd cut out with kitchen scissors, remembering how proud I'd been sliding it under their door. When I found it years later unopened, it felt like discovering a funeral program for a relationship that had quietly died. I sat there in my tiny living room, the hum of the fridge louder than my breathing, and decided I wasn't going to beg for their attention anymore. I was done staging victories for an audience that never showed up. That box wasn't a shrine anymore. It was a verdict. So I taped the lid shut, wrote their address in neat block letters, tucked the note on top the one I'd written months earlier but never sent. If you ever wonder why I stopped trying to earn your approval, read everything inside out loud. Then maybe you'll hear what I've been screaming in silence for years. I paid extra for overnight shipping, but in truth, I wasn't rushing it to them. I was rushing it away from me. Away from the girl who thought if she just worked harder, smiled sweeter, shined brighter, she'd finally be enough. At the post office, I set the box on the scale. The clerk asked if I wanted insurance on the package. I almost laughed. What's the price of a broken childhood? What's the coverage limit on love you'll never get back? I shook my head. No, just mail it. Walking back to my apartment, Boston felt sharper that night. Streetlights hummed. The pavement clicked under my heels. Every sound reminded me of how final this was. Not a tantrum, not a cry for help, a clean break. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange calm, a hollow kind of calm, yes, but calm all the same. I wasn't chasing anymore. I didn't expect the knock. The microwave blinked 912 in tired green digits while leftover Thai hissed in the pan. When I opened the door, my father stood there with the box in his hands like he'd been carrying a sleeping animal he was afraid to wake. He looked older in a way that wasn't about age, creased at the corners, eyes rimmed red, the kind of tired you get when a truth finally outruns you and catches your breath. "Sarah," he said, voice low. The box's cardboard rasped against his coat. For one heartbeat, I felt 12 again, waiting for a reason to forgive him that would never come wrapped in words. I stepped aside and let the silence do the talking. He crossed into my apartment like a man entering a church he'd joked about his whole life. He sat at my little table, the one I bought secondhand, and sanded myself between study sessions and set the box down with both palms flat as if to keep it from sliding away. I didn't know, he said. Didn't know what I kept my voice even. The room smelled like basil and burnt sugar. The radiator ticked. Somewhere upstairs a faucet coughed and died. He swallowed. Why you stopped calling? I slid the note from beneath the lid and set it on top again. Read it out loud. He didn't move at first. His knuckles whitened at the corners like he was bracing for impact. Then he unfolded the paper. The words I'd written months ago came back to me as if someone else had placed them in my mouth. If you ever wonder why I stopped trying to earn your approval, read everything inside out loud. Then maybe you'll hear what I've been screaming in silence for years. His voice stumbled on screaming in silence like the phrase had pried up a floorboard and exposed something damp underneath. He cleared his throat and lifted the first page, my NYU acceptance. Then, Johns Hopkins. Each letter had my highlighter scar's top candidate thrilled to offer you outstanding promise. He read every line like evidence in a case he hadn't known he was on trial for. He nodded to himself, a small, stunned tilt of the chin that said, I can't argue with this. He found the Dean's List emails next 3 years in a row and the congratulatory note from a professor who called me a quiet engine of excellence. He said the words under his breath and glanced up as if checking whether it was permissible to be impressed by his own daughter. I offered him the same quiet I'd survived on. Then his fingers hovered over the handmade card. Pink construction paper. Crooked heart. The glue seam ghosting white at the edges. He turned it over, saw the unbroken envelope flap and flinched the way people do when they bump the corner of a bruise they pretended had healed. Where did you find this? He asked. In your kitchen drawer. Still sealed. He pressed his lips together. Not the angry line I knew from late bills and Brian's little catastrophes, but something thinner, softer, an admission line. I don't remember seeing it. That's the point, I said, and even I was surprised by how gently it came out. I wasn't angry. Anger had burned clean and left a kind of cool blue flame in its place. You didn't see a lot. He kept reading. The room narrowed to the whisper of paper and the metronome tick of the wall clock. Every few minutes he glanced at me like a student, hoping the teacher would say good job if he pronounced the Latin correctly. I let the silence grade him. When he reached the bottom of the box, he found a small square envelope forwarded from my old address. He frowned at the hospital seal, then slid out the card. His mouth parted as he read. Selected as incoming chief resident. The words hung there, heavy and luminous like a chandelier someone forgot to install. He looked up. Chief resident, yes. Why didn't you tell us I let my answer land slow? I wanted to see if you'd find out on your own. He rubbed at his temple the way he used to when Brian got caught lying and he had to choose between being a parent and being a friend. We thought, "You're so capable, Sarah. You never needed—" "There it is," I said softly. "The family motto." He winced. "I didn't mean you did. Maybe not to hurt, but you meant it." I slid the card back toward him. "You built a whole story around Brian needing extra and me needing nothing. It was easier than asking who I was when I wasn't performing." He let out a breath that shook at the end. Outside, rain needled the window. I remembered the science fair ribbon I'd held so tight my palms sweated the ink how second place felt like first, until I looked up and saw an empty space where my parents should have been. The memory rose and settled without toppling me. That's what distance does, it turns avalanches into weather. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded unscripted, almost clumsy. "I'm ashamed." "I don't need shame," I said. "I needed parents." He nodded. "Your mother. She thought you didn't want us there. She said you seemed distant." "Like we were." He stopped. A burden I supplied. The word tasted metallic. "Tell her distance is a measurement, not a personality. It tells you how far you've wandered from your own child." He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he looked like he was trying to memorize my face the way people do when they realize they've taken something for granted and it might be taken from them in return. "Is there a way to fix this?" he asked. Not bargaining, not demanding. A question laid carefully on the table like a fragile dish. I watched steam ghost from the pan on the stove. The basil had gone from bright to dark. I'd let it cook too long while we sat with our ghosts. "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm not interested in a performance. I care about patterns." He nodded again, slower. "Patterns can change. So can titles." I said, tapping the hospital card, "But you didn't show up for those either." We sat there, two people on opposite shores of the same small table, and let the tide do what the tide does, move, then wait. He gathered the papers carefully, as if the letters might tear if he breathed wrong. When he reached for the box, he paused. "Do you want me to take it?" "No," I said. "That box is yours now. Not to keep, just to carry for a while." He understood. Something in his shoulders loosened, then set in a new place. He slid the envelope into his coat. He stood, then hesitated at the door like a man asking permission to leave the scene of an accident he'd caused. "There's more I should say," he tried. I'm sure I said. "Say it to me with actions." My phone buzzed on the table. A text preview flashed. "Dad told me everything. Please pick up if I call." My mother's name lit the screen like a fire alarm I'd trained myself to ignore. I flipped the phone face down and let the vibration fade. Not a refusal, a boundary. He saw it. "She wants to see you," he said quietly. "We both do." Maybe I said, "If she comes without the script." He swallowed. "I'll tell her." He reached for the handle, then turned back once more. "You're a remarkable woman, Sarah. I'm sorry we didn't help you become her." The door clicked shut. The apartment exhaled. I took the pan off the heat, set 2 plates, then put one back. I ate standing up, listening to rain sew the city together. This wasn't revenge, it was calibration. The box had done what it needed to do, not punish but measure, not explode but echo. When the dishes were done, I checked the lock twice and left my phone face down on the table. I didn't need their answer tonight. I had my own. The days after my father left felt like standing in the eye of a storm, eerily calm, but with pressure building around the edges. I thought maybe he'd sit with the box in silence, let the weight of it sink in before anything else happened. But silence doesn't last long in my family. It mutates. It tries to pull you back in. The first message came the next morning. My phone buzzed while I was charting lab results for my new residency. A text from Mom. "We need to talk. Your father said things got intense." "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. You know we love you. Don't be dramatic." The phrase landed sharp the same way it always had, like she was brushing crumbs off a table rather than acknowledging years of neglect. I stared at it for a long moment, then slipped my phone into my coat pocket without replying. An hour later, another ping. "Brian says you're trying to make us feel guilty. This isn't fair." Of course Brian had something to say. My brother had perfected the art of turning every spotlight into his own, even if it meant cutting the cord to mine. That afternoon, he called. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Seriously, Sarah?" His voice was thick with mockery. "You mailed Mom and Dad a box of old homework and pity letters. What are you trying to do, audition for a tragedy?" I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. They were acceptance letters, Brian. Achievements, milestones you never cared to acknowledge. "Oh my God," he laughed, short and cruel. "You're obsessed with needing applause. Not everything in life comes with fireworks. You should be grateful you're even in med school instead of whining about who showed up to clap." I let him finish because I'd learned something in the past weeks. Silence unnerves people more than shouting ever will. When he finally ran out of steam, I said, "This isn't about applause. It's about presence. Something you've been drowning in while I was starved of it." He scoffed. "You've always been dramatic. That's why they worry about me more. You can handle yourself and I can't." And there it was. The family script. I almost laughed. "Brian, I'm done playing the understudy in your one-man show. Lose my number." Then I hung up and blocked him. The quiet after that click felt like the first real boundary I'd drawn in years. That night, Mom called 3 times in a row. Each voicemail was a different strategy. Soft pleading, sharp accusation, then guilt. "Sarah, honey, please pick up. We can fix this. Why are you doing this to us? You're tearing the family apart. We sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us." I sat on my couch, lights off, listening to her voice echo in the dark. Sacrifice. That word again, like they'd carried the world on their backs while I skated free. The truth was sharper I'd carried myself, and they'd mistaken my survival for luxury. For the first time, I didn't call back. I didn't explain, didn't soothe, didn't step into the role of mediator they'd trained me to play since childhood. I let their words sit unanswered, because some fires burn out only when there's nothing left to consume. The power shifted then. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in small, quiet choices. Silencing calls, not replying to baiting texts, refusing to justify my own worth. Each no felt like a brick stacked onto a wall I should have built years ago. And yet, boundaries don't end the storm. They redirect it. By the end of the week, my father texted again, just one line this time. "She wants to see you." No excuses, just words. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I didn't know if he meant apology explanation or one last attempt at pulling me back into orbit. But I knew this much: I'd built enough distance to face them on my terms. For once, the storm wasn't dragging me under. I was walking into it steady, dry, and unafraid. Their house looked smaller than I remembered. The beige siding sagged in places, the shutters peeling like old scabs, and the mailbox still crooked from the time Brian backed into it and left me to take the blame. My chest tightened as I parked in the driveway. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who swallowed blame and called it love. I was a doctor now, a woman who had learned that silence could be louder than screams. The door opened before I knocked twice. My mother stood there with her hair pulled back too tight, a nervous smile on her lips like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Sarah," she whispered, and for a moment I saw the woman who used to braid my hair before school, who hummed lullabies when I had the flu. Then it flickered away, replaced by someone older, more brittle, carved out by years of choosing one child over the other. I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, too sharp, like they'd scrubbed the house, hoping it would wash away history. We sat at the dining table. The same table where Brian's every promotion, every new car, every half-success had been toasted like a coronation. "I'm sorry," she said before I could even sit fully. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need to say it." I folded my hands in my lap. Good start. Tears pooled in her eyes. I thought you didn't need us. You were always so strong, so capable. Brian. He always needed more. And I let that blind me. Not blind, I corrected quietly. You chose. Again and again. Her chin trembled. You're right. She didn't try to defend herself this time. She didn't say we sacrificed or you misunderstood. She just sat with it, letting the weight of her choices spread across the table like spilled wine. My father shifted in his chair. For once, he didn't jump in to buffer her, didn't try to rewrite the story. He only reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo creased, faded, but unmistakable. My 8th grade science fair. Me standing next to a crooked poster board, beaming. Both of them at my side, arms looped around me. The last photo I could remember where I was the center of their orbit. I found this, Dad said softly. I forgot we were even there. I took the photo in my hands. The memory swelled how proud I'd felt, how light my chest had been that day. I hadn't realized until that moment how long it had been since I'd felt that kind of uncomplicated belonging. Mom's voice cracked. I don't know how to fix this, Sarah. I don't even know if I can, but I want to try if you'll let me. I looked at her, at the woman who had missed every milestone that should have been ours to share, at the mother I used to run to with drawings and stories only to be waved aside for Brian's latest need. Part of me wanted to shout to demand an accounting for every absence. Another part wanted to reach across the table and cling to what little was left. Instead, I placed the photo down between us. This is what it takes, I said. Presence. Not perfection, not excuses. Show up, consistently, or don't show up at all. Silence pressed down on the room. Then slowly, my mother nodded. Not in defense, but in surrender. The echo I'd been waiting for wasn't an apology or even a promise. It was that photograph, proof that once they had known how to choose me, and maybe, just maybe, they could again. It's been 3 months since that night at their dining table. Nothing is perfect, maybe it never will be, but something has shifted. My parents started showing up in small ways I'd stopped hoping for. They came to the white coat dinner I hosted for my residency program, sitting quietly in the back, clapping until their hands were red when my name was called. They didn't bring balloons or banners like they used to for Brian. They just brought themselves. And this time, that was enough. They call now not to ask for favors, not to relay Brian's latest emergency, but just to ask how I'm holding up after overnight shifts. They even brought homemade food to my apartment, once lasagna that tasted clumsy but warm. My father asked if I was eating enough. My mother lingered by the fridge, staring at the magnet where I'd pinned the science fair photo, her face soft with something like regret and recognition. Brian, of course, hasn't changed. He texted me once, calling me dramatic and selfish, accusing me of trying to punish the family for not worshiping me. I didn't reply. Boundaries don't need explanations. I blocked his number and haven't looked back. And me, I feel lighter. Not because my parents suddenly became saints or because old wounds healed overnight, but because I stopped carrying the burden of chasing love that was never freely offered. I stopped performing for an audience that never clapped. I realized I don't need applause to validate who I am. I'm a doctor. I'm resilient. I'm worthy even if they never say it out loud. The strangest part, once I let go, they started leaning in. Maybe absence really is the loudest teacher. When I walk into the hospital now, stethoscope around my neck and badge clipped to my coat, I hold my head high. I graduated alone, but I started residency on my own terms. Stronger, clearer, whole. And to anyone watching this who knows the sting of being invisible to the people who should have seen you, first hear me now. You don't need their approval to shine. Your light doesn't depend on their eyes. Have you ever had to build yourself up without the people who were supposed to stand beside you? Share your story in the comments. I promise you're not alone. And if this story hit close to home, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got more stories that prove family betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of your strength.